Sango Navai Panchavayu Navasaptadhatu Nava Panchakosha Navapanipadam Nachapastapayu Navapanipadam Nachopastapayu Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham Om Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Aloha from Hawaii for our second half of Gaudapada's non-touch yoga. We are working towards that chart called non-touch yoga, where we will see the specifics of it. But before we do, I'm setting the stage, and that stage that I'm setting is all based upon that very important word. Remember, their words are very important to us, and one of the most important words, along with Om, as we looked at the Mandukya Upanishad in the first half, its 12 slokas, is that word yoga. So we're not only just defining it, as I said, on 3 levels: yoga as union, perpetual union, yoga as practice, and then yoga as a sort of a physical obsession that is going on. So those are 3 words be good to look at and raise ourselves up to that yoga as practice, 8-limbed, that caters to all sides of our being, not just the physical, and caters to much more than just our health too. You can be sattvic and be a very healthy animal with a healthy mind and body, but you still have not bridged or broached the jnana wisdom yet, and what it means to have no mind rather than just a healthy mind. That, of course, is the yoga as union part of yoga. So we've been defining it that way in a triputi, as is very usual for Indian teachings. And then we've been looking at all the different yogas based on this new chart that I put together this week, this last week. And we've looked at Advaita Yoga, Antar Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Charya Yoga, Laya Yoga, Mantra Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Vasana Yoga, and Prema Bhakti Yoga. The whole first half of this ocean of consciousness. Very well put symbolically, as Holy Mother here says, the truth is this: that one who is really anxious to cross the ocean of this world will somehow break his bonds. No one can entangle him. So that's that mumukshutvam, or that desire for freedom. Again, back to where we left off, isn't it? Vasana Yoga means the yoga of desires. So using those positive desires or those positive leanings in you to move towards that one definitive desire called mumukshutvam, the desire for freedom, has to be authentic, has to be intensely and sincerely felt, and it has to be long-lived. That is, if you fail to develop it, you have to try and try again. Resting is okay, giving up is not, as they say in the yogic path. And that's going to be according to our capacities. Some of us have great capacity in some of these yogas and very little or no capacity in other of them. And we all vary in that way. So that's why Vivekananda said, it may be that not all of us will reach enlightenment in this lifetime, but we can reach a sort of collective enlightenment. That's a very interesting thought that was particular to him. I haven't heard anyone in any scripture in any time ever say that we could get enlightenment as a collective body. It wouldn't be the kind of enlightenment that comes about by something like Laya Yoga or Advaita Yoga, but it would be better than salvation. It would be better than just kind of depending on a savior, because the savior, as you'll hear on September 1st, the title of my talk at the New Thought Church is called Incarnation or Avatar as Exemplar, not Savior. So if we look at the Incarnation as an exemplar, we know that he has come to announce that he is the light of the worlds and that we must be perfect, even as the Father in heaven is perfect. So it's leading us towards a kind of yoga that is, you might say, rather like a description of Ramakrishna Loka in this day and age. It might be that you wouldn't get your formless nirvikalpa samadhi. Very few have gotten that. Even very few among Ramakrishna's disciples had it. But you will get this loka of freedom, of freedom with form, freedom to play, freedom to live dharmically, freedom even to come back dharmically in a realized state and be a blessing into your family, whatever family you choose to be born into. That's going in another direction, that palette of spiritual life and rebirth, as we looked at before, how to paint that canvas of your next lifetime while you're in this lifetime. That's a lot based on Vasana Yoga too. If you know the aspects and ingredients of Vasana Yoga, then you'll know which desires are keeping you from your goal, and you'll de-emphasize those. And then you'll also find out which desires in you are worthy, noble, and you can accent those. And so it's a very powerful yoga. I'm just picking that up because that's where we left off at the first half. Now let's look at these other four. One of them we've already looked at is Ashtanga Yoga. Remember, that's a name for Raja Yoga. It's also a name for Patanjala. All three of those names can be used, or just call it the eight-limbed, but basically some of the commentators of yoga, and there are at least 40 I know of that are very well known, have said that all of these yogas are contained in Patanjali's yoga. So we have to mention Ashtanga Yoga there as a sort of pillar, a sort of corner, of foundation corner of the whole building of yoga, because it is so well constructed and it contains so much. I mean, call the yamas and niyamas yoga if you want. There's the yoga of nonviolence, there's the yoga of truthfulness, there's the yoga of purity, so forth and so on, you see. The yoga of non-coveting. Practice one of those yogas and you'll be mastering a yama. You might think of it as a yama and think, oh, it's just an observance or it's just a moral practice or something. Try thinking of it as a yoga and selecting it for your yoga. It would be sort of like selecting a bhava. You know what a bhava is in Vaishnavism? Like I'm going to practice the bhava of father and son, or I'm going to practice the bhava of mother and child, or I'm going to practice the bhava of God is my friend, or He's my beloved and I'm his beloved. There are different relationships that you practice. Well, in the same way, you can practice different yogas. As Krishna shows you in the Gita here, all of these are different yogas that you can put the rest on hold and just concentrate on that one, and that's going to be very good for your spiritual life. Do you think it's all just going to be one practice of some particular path and it's all over? Or is it that one just plays off the next and feeds off the next, and mastery develops in a whole wide field by degrees? Most people proceed by avastas. The very first chapter of Gaudapada's Karika is called Om and its avastas, the word and its avastas, the word and its stages. So going step by step in stages is a kind of yoga, very powerful yoga, just like he put them together in 8 stages, 8 steps. So all of this to kind of help us remake mentally our image and our idea of what yoga is. So we don't put it off to some future post-mortem emancipation, and at the same time we don't undermine it or give it less clout or emphasis than it needs, than it deserves in our life. We are yogis and yoginis. We are moving along that path, so we have to take this seriously. So Ashtanga Yoga we saw, there's Brahma Yoga. Of course, that's the yoga that's dedicated to Brahman. That could also be called a sort of form of Advaita Yoga, but there are beings who are, like the Brahman priests, who are pretty much just, in the highest rendering of things, dedicated to Brahman, like Sri Ramakrishna would be a great example of a contemporary Brahman priest who was completely into the non-dual Brahman, and Mother Kali at the same time. So Brahman and Shakti are one and the same thing, like fire in its heat, water in its wetness. That kind of idea, that he had this comprehensive yoga. So if you're practicing Brahma Yoga, then you're practicing a very comprehensive yoga that sees everything as Brahman, put simply, but very powerfully. There's Siddhi Yoga, that's the yoga of accumulating powers. Godly powers, not occult powers. We would probably step in and say that right away so people wouldn't get the wrong idea. There are these 6 higher powers of God, they're called. The Ashtabala Siddhas are the occult powers, and they're not worthy of our pursuit, most of the great teachers say. Krishna mentions it in the Gita, and Ramakrishna mentions it in 1800s, how to stay away from the Ashtabala Siddhas. But these 6 divine powers are something that come to a yogi who practices this kind of yoga, Siddhi Yoga. It's the gathering of powers, and actually when you're practicing Ashtanga Yoga, you are dealing with that when you're dealing with the prana. Prana is a power that you're getting a hold of, and they want you a hold of it. It's like the first requisite. It's almost as if you come to a yoga teacher and you say, well, you have the yamas and niyamas, right? Well, go away, you know. They almost assume in the early days, if you were following the path of yoga, that the yamas and niyamas were a given. It would be like somebody here, a priest at church here, saying, you don't follow the 10 Commandments? You don't know what they are? Then go away. How can I help you? You come to church because you've known them, not because you want to learn them. That's second best. So it's the same way with this, you know. They say that when you arrive, you're ready to get a hold of the prana. They assume that that's what you're there for, because that opens all the doors, all the secrets of yoga. Prana is the doorway in. The only thing better than that is if you had mastered it in a previous life, and you don't need to master it in this lifetime. You're coming from the mind, pure mind, when you're born. You're not moving about on the auspice of the prana anymore. That is unmastered. You've mastered the Chit Shakti, so the prana is subservient to that. It bows to the mother. Chit Shakti was a word that the father of yoga used for that energy of consciousness. So prana bows to her. You see. So if you've mastered the Chit Shakti, you're already at a very high level of higher mind before you were born. So that's how the Kundalini Yoga Upanishad states it. I put it in that book, Reclaiming Kundalini Yoga, that's just come out on SRV Associations, that there's those two ways that they see. You either come, master the prana, or you've already mastered the prana and you come via the pure mind. Those are the two ways in which you are born to continue the thread of your yoga. And of course, one would be much more facile and powerful than the other. In the hands of one, a pure-minded yoga would be transforming minds by the hundreds, like Swamiji did in India with thousands of Hindu boys, turning them into monks, giving them inspiration to renounce the world. That's a phenomenon that's hardly ever seen, especially in such a short time. Now there's Shiva Yoga here. Have you practiced your Shiva Yoga today? Have you done your Shiva Puja? Vivekananda used to say. So that's, of course, yoga pertinent to the Lord of dissolution, the Lord of higher wisdom, the Lord of the dance of the noumenon, not the phenomenon, the noumenon. So you're having a formless dance there with Shiva in the highest throes of your own conscious awareness. There's Dhyan Yoga. I almost didn't put Patanjali's yoga there. I was just going to mention that all of these could be found in it, pretty much. But Ashtanga Yoga really is Dhyan Yoga. The whole purpose for Patanjali's yoga is to get you into meditation and samadhi. It's just that you can't jump to it. And we see that in the experiment in the West since these teachings arrived to us. They arrived to us, 1893 with Vivekananda, but we didn't really become aware of them collectively until the 60s. When the media got a hold of it and people came along and they started practicing yoga and getting interested in the Gita and following gurus. But unfortunately that was mixed in with drugs and other things that came along with it. So it wasn't left as a pure experiment in a laboratory of close observation. The reason they did it was for pleasurable experiences and ecstasies and visions and all that. All of those being 3 different levels, really. But the reason you should do it is, to develop your witness consciousness and detach from pleasurable experiences, to be able to see that all of these things are dreams and you're the dreamer, if you want to put it tantrically. If you wake up to the fact that you're dreaming, and then you can turn off the dream and you can turn on your awake state. It's like switching a light on in the darkness. So that being the case, people tried to jump to meditation is where I was going with that. They just started meditating and they didn't have any ground for it. And 40 years later, 50 years later now, in the second decade of the second millennium, we're left in that lurch. A lot of people have been practicing yoga for 40, 50 years, and what do they have to show for it? Are we finding enlightened yogis in the West? Precious few, if any. Are enlightened souls being born with enlightened parents? Are they being born with dharmic parents even? Like Krishna mentions in the Gita, being born with rich parents who are following the Dharma. Pretty much being born sometimes, if you're lucky, with rich parents who aren't following the Dharma. They're just following the Dharma of money. So all of these things have to be looked at with frankness and openness, and we have to face off against this tendency to materialize. If you follow the Western materializing consciousness, then you will lose your race in 3 generations. Who said that? Swami Vivekananda told the Hindu people that before he passed. If you follow the materializing Western civilization, then you will lose your race in 3 generations. So that's how important is this meeting of 2 fists, the rock and the hard place, between keeping spirituality, true religion with a capital R, alive by knowing the philosophies and the yogas, and this other opposite force of materialism, sensualism, and where it can lead, even as low as hedonism and war and evils and so forth being perpetrated on and other negative results of that kind of adharmic lifestyle. So the dharmic lifestyle is very important to follow. We need to not just jump to meditation, we need to gradually, by avastas, by stages, set up the stage for that meditation. Om Shutehe Shatagunam Vidyan Mananam Mananarapi Nidhi Jasam Lakshagunam Anantam Nirvikalpakam. Shankara said it best. He said, to hear about Brahman is good, to take teachings on Brahman is better, to meditate on Brahman is better still, but best of all is that meditation which all doubt dies away. All doubt about the nature of reality, about the doubt about who you are, dies away forever. So that's stages. You hear about it, you take the teachings, and you practice, and then you realize it. And if you leave out the first 3 of those stages, that 4th stage is not going to be very mature. Even if you happened, by some grace, to get a high experience in meditation, what good would you be to the world if you can't teach it? If you can't come back and share it with your brethren, you see, you're just getting a sort of individual liberation. But Swamiji wiped his hands of that. He said, we can have bhakti and mukti later. Right now, we have to serve humanity and get them into an illumined state. Just help them destroy their ignorance. So he was very clear about putting off your individual liberation till later. Why is that? Because it's really a misnomer. You're always liberated. It's not something you can have all of a sudden. See? You're always liberated. Your whole practice of yoga is to bring you to a place to where you can say, oh, I see, I've always been free. You're not going to get free and all of a sudden say, I was once bound and now I'm free. It's not going to happen. That's not non-touch yoga. You can acknowledge the avastas and you can acknowledge the teachers that came before you. That's just wise and practical. But what they were teaching you all along and what the philosophy was telling you was that you are that. And India has not ever been more, there's been no place like India and its teachers that have ever told you that so profoundly and so directly. That thou art, in 3 words. So, put these together and call it yoga. See? Let's look at yogas of the Bhagavad Gita. Now the first 2 I've selected here, I'm going to go through these like a whiz. So Ananya Yoga, hold on to your dhotis or whatever you're wearing. Your chuddars, your saris, or your Western clothes. Ananya Yoga is the yoga of devotion, non-separation. Abhyasa Yoga is the yoga of constant practice. These are pretty much, especially that second one, is an overall general yoga. I mean, you could say there are specific yogas, but when you say Abhyasa Yoga, it means whatever yoga I've selected, I'm going to practice it all the time. That's Abhyasa Yoga. It's not something I'm going to go in fits and starts or run hot and cold with. I'm going to take it up, I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to realize its essence and then it'll become a part of my arsenal. See? So that's a commitment you're making to practice that yoga. The yoga of constant practice. Krishna mentions it in the Gita. When does he mention it? When Arjuna asks that question, what if I can't realize Brahman in this lifetime? Won't my mind just be rent apart like a cloud by the wind at the end of my life? And I deem this yoga, this mind, as hard to control as the wind, he says. And Krishna comes back and says, I see it is hard to control, but it can be controlled by abhyasa yoga. It can be controlled by the yoga of constant practice. So abhyasa yoga is very important for that. Samkhya yoga is the yoga of varieties. Yoga of varieties. The second chapter of the Gita is called Sankhya Yoga, and there's where he gives him all the direct teachings about the self being eternal and free, not subject to birth and death. That's really a kind of non-touch teaching that Krishna is giving Arjuna right out the start. First thing he needs to know on the battlefield. Sannyas yoga is there, yoga of renunciation. Vibhuti yoga is the yoga of lordly powers, very much sort of like this yoga of powers that we just talked about here. Siddhi yoga. Jnana Vijnana yoga is the yoga of knowledge and wisdom, or knowledge leading to wisdom. That has to do with knowledge of the self, not any other kind of knowledge. If you want to put it in any sort of secondary way, you could say knowledge of the self's identity with Brahman, the relationship between the two. That's the subject. You don't stray from that. You don't fall down below that. You keep that the subject. My relationship with God, that has to do with jnana and vijnana. Purushottama yoga is the yoga of the true individual self. That is the Purusha. The indweller in the gate, in the city of 9 gates. 2, 4, 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, right? Indweller in the city of 9 gates. That's what Purusha means. So the way they put it means you're not the body, right? And you're not the senses. Those are just gateways. But there's an indweller in there operating those. So at least there you start with the mind. Akshara Brahma Yoga, yoga of the imperishable Brahman. You start thinking about Brahman as being imperishable, about Atman as being imperishable, about you as being imperishable, and about all of this nature as being imperishable. Everything is eternal. Everything is non-originated. So it very much begins to approach non-touch yoga, which hopefully we'll be able to catch a glimpse of today on this chart. Raja Vidya Raja Guya Yoga. That's the yoga of the supreme science and the sovereign secret. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga is the yoga of knowledge in action. It's a very profound chapter. Again, like I was saying, you could start with jnana and apply it to karma, and then karma would throw it back on you and say, you better do all my works with jnanam, you see. So those two can actually ping-pong back and forth on each other several times, showing off to each other the high ideals that each one holds. So that could be brought together in this jnana karma sannyas yoga. You know, you kind of renounce the world by work that takes you to wisdom, and then you can renounce the world. It's the way most people do it. The problem with it is if you get caught in work and don't get higher wisdom from it. Because Vivekananda has come to tell us, and he's one of his quotes, he says, the only purpose for work is to gain knowledge. It pretty much puts it in a nutshell right there. Work isn't for money, work isn't to get anywhere, it's not going to take you anywhere, you're just going to go around and around in cycles all the time. If the West is practicing any yoga, it probably is that right now. That is, if it can learn anything, it can learn something from that yoga, because it eventually will understand that through all this activity, nothing is happening. No progress is being made that isn't attended by some deviation or some falling, some regression. See, with any kind of step forward, there's always a step back. This is the way it is. So we're kind of fooling ourselves to think that we're making any kind of progress. All progress of that kind is taking place in Maya, and Maya is unreal or illusory, so you just stand back from that in yourself and you say, I am the foundation of all seeming progress. See? It's all taking place in me. And when I give up the dream, I'll know that I was perfect, always will be perfect, and then Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga will have reached its final stage. Beautiful way of putting it. You get the only reason to work is to gain knowledge. When that knowledge is gained, then work and duty will seem, you'll be averse to it. I don't want to do that anymore. I've spent too many lives picking up rocks out of rivers and stacking them on the banks, suffering, doing odd menial jobs and working myself to the bone for nothing. And you look back and see how much time you've wasted that. I want to get some sort of definitive knowledge out of the experiences of everyday life. So it's a very profound yoga. Shraddha-traya Vivagga Yoga is the yoga of the triple faith. Shraddha-traya means 3 kinds of faith. Basically, tamasic faith, rajasic faith, and sattvic faith. Lower, middling, and higher faith, if you will. That is how faith gets developed. Very profound yoga. Vishvarupa Darshana Yoga is the yoga of cosmic form, vision of the cosmic form. There are some people who want to see God so badly in this cosmic form. When Arjuna saw it, he didn't want to see it anymore. It's too frightening. So it's a very profound vision that comes to some beings, but again, you'd have to be very qualified for it and very well prepared for it. And even then, it might, as they say in the 60s, blow your pink oatmeal brains all over the universe. Expression my older brother used to use, you see. So it would be that starkly amazing, see, to see God in this cosmic form appear before you, like Arjuna did in that chapter of the Gita. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga is the yoga of the 3 gunas. Everyone should read that and know what sattva, rajas, and tamas are, and how the cycles act upon their mind, how they act in action, and how they act on nature. Those 3 ways, how the gunas act. Because then it's a teaching very particular to Vedanta and Sankhya and that run of 4 philosophies here: the body, energy, brain, and heart. And becoming aware of the 3 gunas is tantamount to freeing yourself. Swami Trigunatitananda named himself very well that way. That's one of Sri Ramakrishna's direct apostles. He said, finally get beyond the 3 gunas. Very high state. According to Samkhya philosophy and other philosophies, it's one of the last echelons to reach, is to actually get beyond the gunas, because when the gunas go out of equilibrium, the universe begins. When they get back into equilibrium, the universe is gone. So you could see that if you're there at the inception of the universe, then you would see the gunas go out of equilibrium and you'd be pulled down with them. So you'd be working your way back. And this is, in the Ashtanga Yoga, it's very well explained. We've had it on retreat several times. I've taught it, how you reach this level where the gunas will begin to be transcended. It's very, very high state, just penultimate to Kaivalya, which means freedom, spiritual emancipation. Kshetragya Yoga. Do you know the field? And do you know that you're the knower of the field? Those are 2 very important things to know. Do you know what the field consists of? Body, 5 elements, 5 senses, and so forth. Do you know those cosmic principles? Have you categorized them like Sankhya did for you? And do you just take them for granted now and know them? You just figure them into every equation, so you're not left in the lurch anymore. And have you connected them? Air to touch, and ether to hearing, and sight to sun, and earth to water. Earth to smell, and water to taste. Have you made those connections yet? then you're beginning to pull together the knowledge of the field, what the field consists of, and then you can then separate yourself from the field and know yourself to be the knower of the field. Kshetra means knower, it means field, and kshetragya, jnanam, means to know the field. So it's a very profound yoga that Krishna wants Arjuna to learn, and all of us to learn. Daivasura Sampat Yoga. This will bring the death of naivete to your mind. You'll know that the difference between the divine and the demoniacal. And when you know that, then you'll be safe. There's divine, the suras, and there's the demoniacal, the asuras, and you have to know the difference. Not just in terms of gods and so forth, but in terms of people and in terms of your own mental tendencies. There are divine thoughts and there are demoniacal thoughts that occupy the mind. Individual mind, collective mind, so forth. If you can know the difference and separate them out, then you can use the divine to get rid of the demoniacal. That's what Patanjali Yoga is known for, right? Klista vrittis and aklista vrittis. Klista vrittis are thought waves. Klista means negative, and aklista are positive thought waves. You use the positive to get rid of the negative, and then you are qualified to have no vrittis. You can go beyond thoughts. Again, how can you think you can just sit and meditate and squelch your thoughts? Has anyone had much success in doing that? But what if you knew that there was positive and negative thoughts and you got rid of one with the other? That is, you got rid of your ignorance with wisdom. And then all of a sudden your meditation is going along without a hitch. See, you're making progress. What a novel idea to actually make progress in yoga. Rather than just sit around saying, I practice yoga, and get nowhere. So Daivasura Sampat Yoga, very powerful yoga toward the end of the Gita, and followed classically with moksha sannyas. That is, liberation is moksha. You've completed your renunciation of the world. You're seeing all as Brahman, and that liberates you. You have moksha sannyas yoga. That's a very, very long chapter with a lot in it. And we've pretty much taken the whole thing. Now, in the remaining time, which is about a half hour, we do have time to look at the non-touch yoga, which I was actually going to wait to do and show you one other chart, but I was going to look at next week maybe at this pillar of Advaitic axioms with some of the quotes from the Upanishads from it. But let's go ahead and take a look and at least touch the non-touch yoga. Touch on the non-touch yoga. The ultimate yoga, according to Gaudapada's Karika. Remember Gaudapada, 500 to 600 AD, the teacher of Govindapada, who was the teacher of Shankara. So that whole lineage, they're Advaitins, and they're also worshippers of Shiva, and they're also worshippers of mothers. So they brought together three great paths, Shaktism, Shaivism, and Advaita Vedanta, which makes them, that's what makes them so powerful and so long-lived. Shankara order has been going on and on and on now. Like when we sing the Bhaja Govindam hymn, you know, Acharya, every generation has added another verse to that hymn. So now it's a very long hymn that's grown over, since 700 AD. So that's that 1400 years or so. So that's how long the Shankara order has been keeping its ideal high and its teachings pure, and probably greatly due to that beautiful hybrid of Shaktism, Shaivism, and Advaita Vedanta. Gaudapada, kind of seen as the father, at least as far as popularity goes, that Karika sort of putting the exclamation point at the end of his claim for something like that. Well, there's the non-touch yoga. We can see what it is quickly. And there he starts off by saying, I salute the best of all beings, who with incomparable jnanam, that's wisdom, has realized that all beings are unborn and infinite, like the sky. I salute him on bended knee, who teaches the non-touch yoga for the benefit of all beings, free of compromise, superior and unopposed. And you could probably find much more grounds for a statement like that if you did read Gaudapada's Karika. He has no contention with other paths and other ways. He just is so grounded in this way that he doesn't really have to prove a point. It is the Advaita Yoga, it is the yoga of non-dualism, and yogas like Shiva Yoga and Laya Yoga also very much incorporated into it. And there you see him, as it were, sitting there on the bottom, meditating on the hillside, looking at the primordial soul. That's who he's saluting up here above. The best of all beings, who with incomparable jnana has realized the unborn, the infinite, like the sky. He's realized that everything is non-originated. And that's a very important word in Gaudapada's yoga, non-origination. Ajata, if you want to put it that way, or the path of Ajativada, as we looked at briefly on the other chart. Those who know they are unborn and undying. They're just assuming bodies in assumed worlds that are projections of the collective mind and the cosmic mind, and they're giving them up as easily as they assume them. So never by identification, but by association, they come into form, or you might say, hard to explain of course, but they encase themselves in 5 sheaths consciously, and then they just give up those 5 sheaths. And while they're in those 5 sheaths, body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego, those 5 sheaths are around them. It's like, having a great light inside of 5 jars, you see. And they're always constantly discriminating against the 5 sheaths. So when they walk up to you, they're burning through that, you see. You meet them, they're burning through that with intensity. And you'll meet a person like that and you'll feel those 5 sheaths are almost about ready to fall apart, you see. They're barely hanging in, they're barely hanging on to that person, that yogi, that practitioner of non-touch yoga, a sparsha yoga. And pretty soon he will just break his bonds. Nothing can entangle him. We found that the case with Vivekananda. 39 years and he was gone. So in all of those 39 years, it was just, in a sense, one big restless struggle to keep the body that he didn't want. So he was almost about to burst his bonds all the time. And that was also the case with his great student, Shankara. 32 years was all it took for him to deliver his message and drop the body. So death is nothing to them. Time is nothing to them. Bodies are nothing to them. They practice and obtain the non-touch yoga, and they know everything is unoriginated. So that's the one key word in English that we can apply to that most famous of all commentaries. Karika means commentary. Gaudapada's famous Karika on Advaita Vedanta, on the Mandukya, using the Mandukya Upanishad, those 12 slokas I read you in the first half. Unoriginated or non-originated. If you want to use a word that's a little bit easier to understand, non-productive, non-production. Nothing gets produced. Nothing gets born. Nothing dies. End of story. That's just it. No argument. You'll have to see that. Well, here's the requisites of non-touch yoga in the upper left-hand quarter. If there is, and it's a contradiction in terms, and we apologize for it, if there is a practice of non-duality, this is probably what it would look like. Freedom from fear, because fear would be one of the things that, of course, closets you in and makes you attached to the body, like this beautiful hymn we often sing. Kshina shmadina sakaruna japanti mudajana nastikyantvi dantu aha dehatma vadeturaha Praptaha shmavira gatabaya abhayam pratistam yada astikyantvi dantu chinu maharama Krishna dasavayam. One of the verses of these 3 verses of a hymn called Abhaya Pratistam. Pratistam means to be steady. Abhaya means fearlessness. So they're fearless in the practice of non-touch yoga. They're steady in fearlessness. It is only the foolish attached to their bodies who piteously cry, "We are weak, we are lowly." But all this is just atheism. Now that we have attained a state beyond fear, we will abide in our true nature and become heroes. That's what the verse said. He goes on and says, "We will crush the stars to atoms. We will unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We're the children of God." He says, we are the children of Sri Ramakrishna, but it applies to all those beings who know themselves to be one with Brahman. Those who know Brahman become Brahman. That's a statement straight out of the Upanishads. Now, these are scriptures, and you heard a little bit of them, they're very profound, that have that one subject in mind, and maybe, say, 10 or 11 offshoots of it that all have to do very much with that one. That's why I'll show you these 11 axioms of the Pillar of Brahman, the axioms of Advaita Vedanta next week, and look at them with some quotes from the Upanishads that explain them and clarify them. But basically that one subject is at the foundation of it all, and they don't deviate from that. You can't go into a circle of rishis who are Advaita yogas or practicing the yoga of Advaita and talk about anything but that. It just won't fly there. In fact, you might be the one flying as they oust you from their group. You want to talk about sadhana? No. You want to talk about health? No. You want to talk about evil? No. We're talking about Advaita Vedanta because Brahman's the only reality. And so it's a way of focusing on the essence. Tathagata Garbha, Buddha's name. It's a way of focusing on the essence, of going to the essence. That essence, Tat. Tathagata Garbha. So Garbha means an unconditioned mass of pure conscious awareness, an essence. Brahman is an unconditioned mass of pure conscious awareness, birthless, deathless, and ever free. Knowing that, render the outside and the inside into one state. Then pass your time contentedly and be free. So outside, nature, senses, objects, people, worlds. Inside, mind, thoughts, intelligence. Render them into one, because one has come out of the other. All of that came out of your thought process. All of those objects are intelligence solidified. Why are you calling it Maya? Why are you calling it a separate world? It's intelligence out there, and it's intelligence inside. Come on in, the weather's fine. Water's warm in here. Get in. And it's inviting, non-touch yoga. It's not sterile and cold. It's not fearful. So get rid of your fear. If you have to sing a song about it or write a song about it, do that to help convince yourself. But you'll want to be a candidate for freedom from fear. So we'll mark that down as the first requisite to the non-touch yoga. Second, self-control and perseverance. You'll probably recognize a combination of one of the 6 jewels along with one of Holy Mother's favorite qualities. One of the 6 jewels is self-control. It's the second of the 6 jewels of Vedanta, the first being inner peace, right? Sama and Dhamma. Should I sing the song about it? Samo Dhammo Dui Atane Mono Chalo Nija Niketane. O mind, return to your own home, your true abode. Oh, even a simple devotional song is singing about that one non-dual state, which is your true source. Why not go there? So you'll need inner peace and self-control, because the robbers along the highway of life could take away your precious spiritual merit that you've taken so much trouble to gather, you see. So you must keep it protected by these sentries of inner peace and self-control. So all of this, you're talking about a song in the Bhakti Yoga tradition that applies to a yoga of the highest order, that applies to Gaudapada's own description of non-touch yoga. It's all connected, like the two wings of a bird. They're all singing about the same thing. One's calling it bhakti, one's calling it this, one's calling it that. I'll show you that out of Gaudapada's Karika next week, you see. They're all taking the Atman and calling it different things. The materialists are calling it objects. The seekers of heaven are calling it lokas or celestials or angels. You know, those who are worshippers are calling it gods and goddesses. It's all one Atman. That's right from Gaudapada's Karika. He has it all listed there about what these different people call different things, which is really just the Atman. Non-touch yoga, you see. It can't be a form. It can't turn into a form. It can't grow. It can't be produced. It can't. Since it can't be produced, it can't be unproduced. Since it was never born, it can't die. It's eternal. I mean, for goodness sake, they don't call it the non-eternal Brahman. So put together self-control with perseverance, constancy, if you will. And, you know, I mean, every time you mention perseverance, you probably should, like Holy Mother, just put patience with it. Purity, perseverance, and patience. The 3 P's were her 3 favorite things. She liked perseverance because she knew you wouldn't get anywhere without keeping up your spiritual practice. You wouldn't get anything by betraying your guru. You wouldn't get anywhere by giving up your mantra. You wouldn't be anything by leaving your sangha and trying to look for another one. You won't go anywhere. You'll just develop a samskara or an impression of betrayal, which is good. It's not good for you. A guru's fish is already fried, and he's busy frying other fish. So you're just harming yourself when you go contrary to the Dharma. That's what Ram says in the Adhyatma Ramayana. Never be a betrayer of the Dharma, always be a supporter of the Dharma. Make sure you're always a supporter of the Dharma. Then you won't run afoul of illumined souls and well-lit pathways, yogas. All right, self-control and perseverance together, a mighty combination. Let's file them under that requisite for non-touch yoga. Requisite means, as you know, something that will qualify yourself for it. It doesn't mean that it's a quality like an ornament on a Christmas tree. It's the green of the tree. It's something that is perfectly connected in every way, which is the meaning of the word yoga, union. Eternally connected might be a better way of saying it than union. Moderate desire and enjoyment. Krishna tells that in the Gita to Arjuna too. Those who eat too much or eat too little, yoga is not for them. So you must moderate. Moderation is a huge part of the Buddhist path. So giving up too much or taking on too much is extremism, you see. So you find that middle path. Best teachers of the middle path are her, him, Krishna on the wall there. Those are exemplars of the middle path. And yoga is one of the best exemplars of the middle path. Awaken the mind to have samadhi. Awaken the mind is going to mean purifying it. Purifying it is done with things like mantra yoga and Ashtanga yoga's early limbs. The mind is in the head. You see, it's at the top of the whole chain, and its gaze It has two eyes, but in this forehead is the third eye. These two eyes are always looking down to the lower centers, but this third eye is always looking in to the crown center. It's got two petals, one that goes out and one that goes in. So Shiva Yoga, Vishnu Yoga again. So there, Shiva and Vishnu sit, as it were, ushering souls in and ushering souls back out as to their stature and predilection. So, speaking somewhat symbolically, but could be taken literally too, when you're actually having those experiences, you want to open that third eye, open that heart, and awaken the mind to have its first early spiritual experiences. This lifetime, if you got those preliminary spiritual experiences, that would be enough for you. At the time of death, you would see your Ishtam and you would go to your Ishtam. There wouldn't be anything in your way. So that's going to be penultimate to having samadhis. Now remember, as far as Father of Yoga is concerned, Ashtanga Yoga, those samadhis are fourfold, and the first two are full-fold too. So you have samadhi of knowledge of objects, solid knowledge of samadhi of knowledge beyond objects. Then you have samadhi of knowledge of bliss, bliss samadhi, and then a samadhi of self, ashmita, ripe self, before you can get to the unseated samadhi. So when they say here, have samadhis, yes, they want you to have the non-dual samadhi, but again, can you jump to something like that? Or are you going to have to take the stairs, one by one? Are you such a high jumper that you can jump from the lowest step to the highest step? And even if you could, you wouldn't know what you jumped. So you wouldn't be able to go back and tell others what was there. So step by step is the way to go. Stabilize the mind during unrest. That's beautiful, really. You'd think it doesn't have any room in the non-touch yoga, but as a prerequisite, they're telling you pretty much that even into the late stages of spiritual maturation, you're having problem with doubt, you're having problem with fear, you're having the dark night of the soul come upon you. It's just that for some beings, it's not their fault. See? They know the gunas are acting, and they're also taking on the collective karma of other beings, so they're doing that willingly, like saviors and so forth, which are exemplars. So you stabilize the mind during unrest means that's building your opportunity to build strong stance, abhaya pratistam, steady, right? So whenever these difficulties come to you, it's the way of yoga. Patanjali says so. Even with such a thing as getting a cold, he says so. It's your way of building strength by facing off these difficulties and always telling yourself, I'm not the body, but I am the Supreme Self. I am the soul. I am the indweller in the body in the city of 9 gates. And that city operates under my auspice. No one else's. It comes and goes under my own auspice. I produce it, I destroy it. All with the power of my intelligence. Projection, mental projection. So if you can stabilize the mind during periods of unrest, it's much more efficacious and helpful than just being in sattva all the time. You get spoiled. Mm-hmm. So let these come and then stabilize yourself and face them off. Be steady. Abhaya pratistam, see. Like Shiva. Practice your Shiva yoga. And then attain the goal. You might say that attaining the goal will first call upon you or require you to acknowledge the existence of Brahman and acknowledge yourself as that. I am Atma Brahma. The self is Brahman. And then you will attain the goal of Brahman. So these are all said to be requisites of non-touch yoga, a way to practice this duality. Here we will end, but let me read you this final quote. Where there is no thought, where there is no taking up and no giving up, At that time, wisdom of the self is well set in itself, is non-originated, remaining equal. This is verily what is known as the non-touch yoga by name, very difficult of realization by ordinary yogis. So he's classifying this yoga as a yoga that's only attainable by those beings who have perfected their practices. They're at a very high level of perfecting practice of yoga. Usually other people won't see this or won't approach it. Ordinary yogis, if the term can be used. That's right out of the Karika too, and I'll have other quotes out of the Karika for you next week, and we'll also finish this chart, and we will also look at the pillar of Advaitic axioms, which is and also a very powerful chart to look at, because it really explains in these 15 or so steps how an Advaita Vedantist would start at the very top and work down towards all the problems or considerations that would come to a person who's trying to practice perfection in a world such as this, and how they would take on all of these conditionings that are coming at them and neutralize them. Very beautiful way in which this has been put together by one of the Swamis of the Ramakrishna order, and that I made a chart out of. So here, let's end with a chant a little bit early, and it's a good time to break, and then we will head for next Sunday's class on Gaudapada's non-touch yoga. Om Bhadram Karnebihi Shriniyamadeva Bhadram Pasyema Akshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangayish Tushtuvam Sastanuvir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swastina Indra Vrida Shravaha Swastina Pusha Vishwadevaha Swastina Starksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we see with these eyes what is good and spiritual, and may we hear with these ears what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshipping the Lord and Mother of the universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life which is beneficial to ourselves and to all other beings. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Muktir nameyash nacha sangatam naiva muktir nameyash chidananda rupaha shivoham shivoham chidananda Shivoham, Shivoham. I have no form or fancy. The all-pervading am I. Everywhere I exist, yet I am beyond the senses. Neither salvation am I, nor anything that may be known. I am pure knowledge and bliss. I am Shiva. I am Shiva.